Howdy, howdy, what is going on? Welcome to episode 31 of the Back of the End Zone podcast. I'm Josh Ryzik here with Brian Koleski. You already know that we can't wait to get in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
We got some college football playoff rankings now in the mix.
We got some big games this week, man.
Yeah, seriously big games. And we have a guest picker this week, Savannah Rose Fonville, who's a classmate of Bryant and ours, great student here at South Alabama.
She's in the same major as us, journalism. And she knows her stuff when it comes to sports. So, especially football. Unfortunately for you, she's a Michigan fan.
She is a Michigan fan, but you already see I'm sporting the number 1 Ohio State jersey because who's the number 1 team in college football right now? Ohio State. And we're going to get into that later, not right now in the intro.
Number one.
You can say whatever you want to say.
Georgia should be the number 1 team, and y'all know it.
Whatever you say.
Bama should be the number 1 team.
You can say whatever you want to say.
Put Auburn at number 1.
All right.
Ohio State.
It just means more in the SEC. Of course, Brian's going to go there.
Put Vanderbilt at number 1 instead of Ohio State.
We're going to get right into it here shortly. We're going to give some previews, too, obviously, for some of our bigger matchups this week.
We got Bama, LSU, South and Troy, Mizzou at Georgia, man. Some of these big matchups that where it's coming down to the stretch where these are some must-win games for some of these teams, especially for that one in Tuscaloosa.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And a couple Big 12 sleepers this weekend, too. And so we're going to dive right into it. Episode 31. Let's get it. Since Brian's ready, we're going to dive right into segment 1 right now. But before we do, we would like to thank 251 Pool Works for sponsoring segment 1. They're family owned and operated. 251 Pool Works offers pool cleaning, maintenance, and repair. They serve the greater Mobile, Baldwin County, and Pensacola areas. And if you are needing any monthly pool cleaning, service, and or repair, give them a call at 251-978-7736 for the Pool Works. Obviously, it's getting cold right now in Mobile.
Yeah, and if your pool looks anything like the college football playoff rankings that were released this week, like Ohio State being at the top, please get it clean ASAP because that is one awful-looking pool.
Whatever you say. But, all right, let's just get right into it right now because obviously college football playoff rankings, the first college football playoff rankings were officially released. And a couple things that kind of sparked social media last night, but I mean, as you guys are seeing this within the last few days, social media kind of had a feud over Ohio State jumping Georgia and Michigan to that 1 spot. Obviously, Ohio State was 3rd ranked in the AP poll, and Georgia was 1, Michigan was 2. Ohio State made that jump. But obviously, college football playoff rankings were going off resume based off at this point in time and strength of schedule. You looked at Ohio State, they had the 15th ranked strength of schedule, and they beat Penn State at home, and they also beat Notre Dame on the road. And both of those teams at the time when Ohio State played them were top 10 teams. Obviously, I'm an Ohio State fan. I'm wearing my Ohio State jersey right now. I'm going to have a little bit of Ohio State bias. Yes, I'm happy that we're at number 1, but job's not finished. Obviously, there's still the rest of the season to go. There's still that Michigan game at Michigan, which is going to be one for the books this year, obviously, but I mean, they're going based off resume. I see why they did that. But it's also interesting to look at this, too, because obviously we got top 4, Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State. Then Washington and Oregon are the first 2 out, which is interesting enough, too, because obviously Washington beat Oregon. And then you got Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Penn State, and Missouri. But when you think about the 12-team playoff, when the 12-team playoff comes around next year, at this time, you look at that, that's exactly what it would be. But Missouri wouldn't get that 12 spot, and Tulane would actually grab that 12 spot because they would be the one group of 5 school getting in. And I mean, it's interesting to look at it from that perspective now, too, looking at this first college football playoff ranking and thinking, oh, if there was a 12-team playoff right now.
This time next year, it's going to look completely different. I do have a little bit of beef of Missouri. Now, obviously, LSU has one more loss than Missouri, but LSU beat Missouri. I think LSU should kind of be ranked a little bit higher than Missouri, but I get it. Ole Miss being in the top 10 is not surprising. Ever since they lost to Bama, they've been on a roll. These top 5 teams, you really could make a case for just about any of them to be at the number 1 spot. I think, yes, even Michigan with the weak schedule that they've played, they've still been dominant in every game that they've played. And so And all this is going to cancel itself out in a few weeks anyway. Like you said, you got the Michigan-Ohio State game. One of those teams are going to lose. Michigan plays Penn State in a couple weeks. You never know.
Yeah, we were just talking about that too. I mean, because Michigan they play Purdue this weekend, and then the following week they play at Penn State at Beaver Stadium, and that's a huge game for Michigan because obviously after Penn State lost to Ohio State last week against Indiana, they didn't really play that well, and that's questionable if it was just a bad game or if truly they aren't the team that they were when they played Ohio State. They just weren't made out to what they were advertised to be. Yeah. And we'll see that come in 2 weeks when Michigan goes to Beaver Stadium because that's definitely going to be a whiteout game, more than likely be a night game, and we'll see how Michigan is able to handle that sort of environment, which I think they'll be fine in. But that's a game that could be an upset game for them too, and then you think potentially when Ohio State plays Michigan, say there's a one-loss Michigan team against an undefeated Ohio State team. Yep. God forbid Ohio State loses. But then looking at the Big Ten championship, that'll be interesting with a one-loss Penn State, a one-loss Michigan, and a one-loss Ohio State if it came down to that.
And only that in the Pac-12, Oregon and Washington will more than likely be playing each other again in the Pac-12 title. Texas and Oklahoma still got some work to do. Bama still got some work to do. Of course, they got LSU this weekend. And then they got the Iron Bowl in a few weeks. Then if they make it past those teams, then they'll have a date with Georgia in an SEC championship game. So all this stuff is going to cancel itself out. I still think it's probably as wide open as it's ever been in this 14 layout. Probably since the first year it was implemented, I think it's as wide open as it's ever been. All the way down to LSU at 14, and you're saying, "Oh, well, Brian, a two-loss LSU team could never get in." Don't never say never, because they were in this same spot last year before they before they beat Alabama, and then if they'd had beaten Georgia last year with two losses or 2 or 3 losses, they would have they possibly would have gotten in.
Yeah, and they possibly could have gotten in even over Ohio State. More than likely, because like Ohio State had that one loss to Michigan, obviously didn't get to play in the conference championship.
The SEC champion is more than likely going
to get in, yeah, and that's one thing to talk about too, especially considering Bama in the mix too. But another conference that's going to be interesting, as of right now, I don't see a Big 12 team making the playoff regardless. And I think that's the one thing. If Oklahoma didn't lose last week to Kansas, I don't think we'd be saying that right now. But obviously, you look at the Big 12, as of right now where it stands, there's 5 teams all tied for first place in the Big 12 between Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Texas, and Kansas State. All of them are 4-1 in conference. And I just don't see any of them making the playoff right now. Obviously, I think that loss to Kansas was huge, and it's kind of like what we always talk about with the Pac-12. They eat each other alive, and it's like they still have a ton of conference games against one another, and especially this weekend too between like Kansas State, Texas, Oklahoma State, and it's like those are other games where they're going to continue to eat each other alive.
Same thing with the Pac-12 too, because yes, Washington might be undefeated now, but they still got a tough stretch. They got USC this weekend. I'm sure they still got to play Utah, Washington State. And then if they play Oregon again and they lose, then okay, well you still got. I don't know, man. It's just gonna be tough.
I don't think Washington escapes the regular season with undefeated. I think they get one loss. Like you just said, alluding back to it, Washington's remaining schedules at USC this weekend. Then they host Utah. Then they go to Oregon State and they host Washington State. So they play. Some tough
competition.
Their last 4 games are some of the toughest of their schedule, other than Oregon. And I mean, man, it's just so iffy.
I think it's just as wide open as it's ever been. And next year, and I've alluded to this many times. Next year will be so much different because you'll now have more teams in the Big 10 and the Big 12 and in the SEC, and you'll have more teams in the ACC as well. You have 3 more teams added to the ACC, which that has never made complete sense to me. But anyway, these teams will not have to go undefeated to make the playoff next year. You can still have an Alabama that say even that. Okay, let me just put this Bama LSU game will not mean as much next year because, especially with these teams, if maybe for LSU because they're outside. Like say they're 14, they'd be outside of the 12-team format. But Alabama with 2 losses could still get in. Alabama with 3 losses could probably still get in. Same thing with Georgia. Same thing with Ohio State, Michigan. They would not have to go undefeated to win these games. So next year it'll look a lot different. And why not for the last year of the 14 playoff? Why not go all out? And like this is like I said before, this is as wide open as it's ever been. Any of these teams in the top 10, I feel like could go and win it all.
Yeah, and I mean, but looking at this right now, as if you're looking at it from a 12-team playoff perspective, if you kind of ignore the fact that the best Group of 5 school would get in, looking at it right now, 11 of the 12 teams are going to be in the Big Ten and the SEC next year, other than Florida State. And that's just another crazy fact about it, because you look at how that's going to be, and it could surely be like that next year, where more than half of the teams are from the Big Ten and the SEC.
And 13 of the top 15 would be the same way, except for Notre Dame, except for Notre Dame and Louisville and Florida State. I'm sorry, 12 of the 15.
Yeah, and I mean, it just really kind of turned heads a little bit too, because then it's cool to see though too. Like you look at the play, like with the Group of 5 thing, and I like how they're doing that because it gives the best Group of 5 team a chance. And say there's a super dominant Group of 5 team, like say JMU this year, obviously they can't get in, but say they're already. But I'm saying next year, say there's a Group of 5 team already in the top 12, and then they put another one in. Yeah. I don't know if they would do that necessarily, but it's like you look right now, Tulane and Air Force drop in at 24 and 25. Man, who would love to see some RPOs running in the college football playoff from Air Force? Like, I mean, it's just kind of I love how you can look at that concept like that from here on out, because as much as I love the 14 playoff, it sucks because there are other teams that deserve a chance.
Yeah, like, and we're gonna see what it looks like next year. There'll be I think all the divisions in conference will be eliminated. I think the SEC has eliminated divisions. Big Ten has done it. ACC, like all the divisions will be eliminated. You'll see rematches in conference championship games, which probably could eliminate some of like these double teams getting in, like Michigan, Ohio State, or Georgia, Alabama, or LSU, Georgia, whatever you want to call it. Like you got like you could kind of eliminate that to some degree if there are rematches in conference championship games, because like next year Georgia and Alabama are going to play each other in the regular season and possibly the SEC championship game. Next year, LSU and Alabama are always going to play each other, So it's definitely interesting to see these rankings and think ahead to next year. But staying in this year, you have I think every team in the top 10 could possibly get in, except for maybe the possibility of Ole Miss, just because they would need some major help on their side. They would need LSU to beat Bama, obviously. But then they would need Bama and LSU to at least lose one more time. Yeah,
and the odds are not in their favor for sure. But I have a huge question for you. So you look at the top 4, obviously, even the top 12, the only non-next year Big 12 SEC, Big 10 SEC team in there is Florida State, sitting at 4. Obviously, 8-0, 6-0 in conference in the ACC. Do you think, Bryant, looking at Florida State's remaining schedule, they play Pittsburgh, Miami, North Alabama, and Florida, and they will probably win that out, I would assume.
They're going to win out.
But then it's looking like they'll play maybe a one-loss Louisville team in the ACC championship. Do you think that Florida State escapes undefeated and wins the ACC championship, or do you think they might get a loss and maybe squeak out of the playoff?
I think they'll win out. I think their schedule favors them. The fact that like Louisville, North Carolina, Clemson, Miami, Duke, they're all like kind of tearing each other apart. I think that's kind of helping Florida State. I think that they'll win. I think when the team I'm the most sure about that would win out of the top 10 is Florida State. Like the team, like if I had to pick a team that could finish the season undefeated besides Georgia, it would be Florida State.
Whatever you say. I mean, and I could definitely see Florida State winning out.
I just think their schedule's a little bit easier down the stretch than probably the rest of the top 10.
I think it is too, but my big if is Pitt pulled off an upset against Louisville a couple weeks ago, and they go to Pitt this weekend. I'm not saying Pitt's going to beat them. I think Pitt was on a different level, and Louisville was just not ready going into that game.
Yeah.
And I think Florida State definitely wins that game with ease. But, yeah, I would agree that Florida State should come out of the season in the ACC championship undefeated, automatic playoff bid in the top 4. I think they might sit at that. I don't think they'll jump past 3. I don't think they'll be number 2 or number 1. I think they'll either sit at 4 where they're at now or maybe jump to 3. I just don't think that they will pass up, say, the Big Ten champion between Michigan and Ohio State or Georgia.
My thing is, like, if Michigan and Ohio State have one loss, or Michigan or Ohio State have one loss, because one of them's going to lose to the other in a few weeks in that game, and they're going to miss the conference championship. If it's Ohio State, or if it's Michigan that has one loss, but you have Florida State who might have one loss but still win the ACC. You still have Georgia who probably win the ACC. I mean, not the ACC, the SEC.
How's that?
Probably undefeated. Georgia probably undefeated, but then you have Bama. Or Georgia. Take this scenario. Okay, you have Ohio State with one loss. Okay, Michigan is undefeated. They're the top team. They won the Big Ten championship. Georgia loses the SEC championship to Bama. Bama has one loss. Georgia has one loss. Florida State has one loss. Washington might have one loss. Oregon might have one loss. Texas might have one loss. So where do you start? Like,
where do you draw the line?
Where do you Now, obviously, Bama would probably go because they won the SEC championship. Florida State would go because they won the ACC championship. The conference champions more likely would get the benefit of the doubt, but we've seen it in the past where they don't.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be interesting this year because I think it's even crazier than last year. Because obviously last year everyone thought that USC was going to jump into the playoff because Ohio State lost to Michigan, but then USC went and lost in the Pac-12 championship to Utah for a second time. And I mean, it's an interesting scenario this year with all the possibilities of the one-loss teams. Like, say Washington gets another loss, or especially if Florida State escapes undefeated, and then you got Georgia potentially.
Or LSU, they beat Bama this weekend, and then they went out and somehow beat Georgia in the SEC championship.
Yeah,
they have 2 losses, but they're still the SEC champion. What do you do?
Yeah, the College Football Playoff Committee is going to be in a huge predicament, and either way, there's going to be some upset people, regardless if there's a 2-loss LSU team getting in or a 1-loss, whoever. And
like I've said before, like earlier in this segment, it is as wide open as it's ever been, in my opinion.
And it's going to come down to some close games in these next couple of weeks. It's finally November 1st as of today, but when this releases, be a couple days later. But it's November now, and we got rivalry week coming up in just a couple of weeks. And it got the Iron Bowl, got the game, got some.
Well, Bama right now, we're not worried about the Iron Bowl. We're worried about this LSU
I know, but I'm just saying, either way, rivalry week is insane. I'm just saying I'm excited because that's approaching, getting closer and closer. But I'm not looking too far ahead because Ohio State plays Rutgers this weekend, and Rutgers is going to be
Rutgers.
I know they'll beat. As of right now, I'm praying we beat Rutgers, but got to take it week by week, regardless. There's unfinished business for all of these teams in the college football playoff rankings, and I mean, it'll just be crazy to see what plays out these next couple of weeks.
Air Force number 1.
That's what a lot of people have been saying. A lot of people have been saying if JMU didn't have the bowl ban, we should see Air Force, JMU. I can't remember who the other teams were. It was like Air Force, JMU, like Florida State, and then like Texas A&M in the college football playoff. Like Texas A&M win out, Bama lose this weekend, then like LSU lose another game. And I was like, what the? Like, I mean, obviously that's not going to happen. But
that's some wild scenarios.
Hey, there's some wild scenarios that
like the world would have to, but we talk about this every year where we talk about the wild scenarios that could play out, but that never happens. Like you never have the nightmare scenarios. Somehow, like and the. Let's see, how long has the playoff been around? What, almost a decade now?
Just about, yeah.
We've never had the doomsday scenarios to where like, say a 2-loss LSU wins the SEC championship, or a 3-loss Texas A&M, or something like that, or you have a number of teams that are qualified. I don't know. We've never had the doomsday scenario, and we're sure as heck not going to have it next year when we start the 12th team because it'll be more decisive next.
Exactly. But, I mean, there could be – College Football Kings posted this on Twitter a couple days ago, and I talked to you about it a little bit yesterday, Brian.
Oh, Lord.
But there is some doomsday scenarios that could happen, but it would just be if all hell broke loose and all of, say, these top, 6 teams started to lose these next couple of weeks. Yeah. Because you look, there could be a 9-4 ACC champion, Virginia Tech. Iowa State could win the Big 12 at 10-3. Nebraska could win the Big Ten at 10-3, which probably will never happen. But you never know.
They are getting rid of Brian Ferentz or whatever his name is.
Stranger things have happened, and there could be a 10-3 Arizona Pac-12 champion. And obviously, like, they won't get into the playoff, but you never know. Or Texas A&M could win the SEC at 10-3, which probably won't happen either.
Oh.
But who's against it? I saw that and I was like, it kind of had me cracking up. Like, obviously,
I need to just throw Auburn up there in the SEC
might as well.
champion. They're not gonna make it, but you know what I mean.
Hey, who knows? Maybe Georgia will lose to Mizzou this week. No, I'm just playing. That's definitely not going to happen. But
are you giving away your pick already?
That's not my pick. All right, yeah, y'all stay tuned. Just wait. But I think that's going to close it out for segment 1 with a little bit of this college football playoff ranking nonsense, jumbo rants from both Bryant and I.
And this is not college football related, but my Broncos have beaten the Chiefs for the first time since 2015. Do you not realize how long that's been? Do you not realize all the birthdays that have gone by? Like, Patrick Mahomes was still in college the last time the Broncos beat the Chiefs. It is an amazing feeling. Screw the Chiefs. I just want to say that.
All right, whatever you want to say, but Broncos still aren't getting a higher pick than the Bears, so I can tell you that much. But that's going to close it out for segment 1. Stay tuned for segment 2 and our Week 10 college football pick'em segment coming up.
All right, before we start segment 2 is sponsored by Now Fitness. Now Fitness is a gym and fitness center based in Groveville, Alabama. They do personal training, group sessions with CrossFit, and other workouts, and they help local athletes get in their best shape and train. Call 251-269-3065 for more. And like we said last week, New Year's is approaching. You might want to start getting those resolutions together. Go now Fitness at the gym.
Yeah, New Year's is approaching, and obviously New Year's resolutions are what people might be wanting, and Dabo Sweeney might be wanting a New Year's resolution for the Clemson Tigers. I know this is a little bit off track of where we're kind of going, but if you didn't hear this past week, on Monday, actually, every single week, Dabo Sweeney goes on a Clemson radio show, and they take all these calls from callers. People can leave voice messages, like voicemails, or they can sit there and just say what they want to say about Clemson football. And Dabo sits there and chimes in and has responses to these people's questions. And there's someone named Tyler from Spartanburg that called in and was really disappointed with Clemson's 4-4 start, really disappointed with the recent loss to NC State, and spoke for like almost 3 minutes just sharing his complaints about how Dabo is making $11.5 million or $10.8 million, and he's pissed off that they're 4-4 and he's making $10.8 million. And he claimed that 98.5% of Clemson fans are pissed at Dabo. And it was just interesting to see because from the outside looking in perspective, obviously neither of us are Clemson fans. And for me looking in, I think it's just a little off for a fan to be. I understand that you're upset. You're 4-4. There was really high expectations to win the ACC this year. But Dabo chimed back, and Dabo literally told him, they won 11 games last year. They had a great year last year, and fans like that are a part of the problem because Dabo explained how Dabo got upset because the kid was like, I know you're religious, Dabo, which I like about you, yada, 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 but blah, 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 blah. You look at what Dabo has done for Clemson since he's been there, and he completely turned that program around and helped them win 2 national titles and just get to the success that they're. Obviously, players going to affect with that too, but he was the head coach. He still is the head coach. Obviously, not where they want to be at 4-4. I don't remember when their 4-loss season was, but you got to think about the fact that Dabo's still the head coach, and he has led Clemson to heights that they never saw when Dabo wasn't there.
Yeah, I don't know, I can see it from both perspectives, but man, I get it. Clemson's supposed to be in the national championship picture every year, especially with their most recent success. Winning 2 national championships, going to the playoff year in and year out, and competing for national championships. And with the recruiting that Clemson brings in, and the resources that they put into their football program, you expect Clemson to be year in and year out competing right there with the heavyweights: Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Florida State. You expect Clemson to be right there right in the mix, getting ready to be in the playoff. So I get it, and everybody, they brought in Garrett Riley, and they brought in, they got rid of DJU, who's now having success at Oregon State, and you wonder what was the problem there. Now Cade Klubnik's having some of the same problems, and he might transfer out after the season. There's a lot of talk about that. So now, so it is kind of odd to see Clemson in this state. I mean, they still recruit at a high level. I mean, you look at the recruiting rankings; they're still in the top 10 somewhere. They're still right there with the heavyweights, and as far as recruiting goes. But it's not. It's kind of like the situations are similar, but they're not the same. It's kind of like A&M's, to where they have all the talent, they're just not putting it together right now.
Yeah.
But it's not the same, because Dabo has been known to put it together and win 2 national championships. Could have probably had a third or somewhere in there. But A&M hasn't. But it's still kind of a similar situation to me.
Yeah, but I mean, for me too, it's just at the point where I think Clemson fans are upset that they're not in the playoff, that they're completely out of the playoff picture now, and they had really high hopes going into this year. That last year they weren't in the playoff picture, and it's like for them, it's like for me as an Ohio State fan and you as a Bama fan, like I guess I get it to an extent as a fan. Like I would be upset if Ohio State right now is 4-4. But at the same time, I'm not going to call in and complain to Ryan Day about how he shouldn't be making this much money after looking at his resume the past few years. Like Dabo said when he chimed back in, is that he won 11 games last year, and rightfully so, won the ACC championship. And like at the same time, it's like people have off years, and I know that last year you didn't make the playoff. You're upset about that. And now, obviously, this year, no ACC championship game, no playoff. But it's like, I'm on the more Dabo side here, like cut Dabo a little bit of slack, because if you're looking at it from, say, Nick Saban's perspective or Kirby Smart or Ryan Day or Harbaugh's perspective, if they're going to have an off year, I don't think, as a fan, you're going to be upset because nobody wants to have an off year. You want to be in the playoff conversation every year. But it's like, look at what the coach has done for you since then, especially like Saban-wise. Yeah. Like, it's like you're not going to be calling for his head like this kid was, and that's kind of really all I have to say about it.
There are people that still call for Saban's head if we're not in the playoffs.
And and that's bound to happen either way. But
my thing though, like I think a lot of like there is like I think what a lot of it is Dabo has been one of the most like vocal against the NIL and the transfer portal. He has not been willing to go into the transfer portal and fill in needs where just about everybody else in the country has been. He's not. I don't know how they use NIL at Clemson, but I don't know if they use it to the same strength as the other programs do, like Bama, Georgia, and I get it. You might be against the way NIL is used. You might be against the transfer portal the way it's used, but sooner or later you're gonna have to embrace it and use it. And I think that's kind of the problem here, because I mean, Nick Saban has not been the biggest fan of it. He's voiced his displeasure about the way it's ran, the way it's used. Same thing with NIL, but he's not against the players getting paid. I don't think anybody is against the players getting paid, but still, Nick Saban has proven to adapt and kind of embrace it either way, because you've seen Bama go to the portal and get players that they needed, and then use NIL for certain instances. And so I think a lot of it is that Clemson fans are probably not seeing Dabo embrace NIL, embrace the transfer portal, and adapt to the way the sport is changing. And I think that's where the frustration comes in. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a Clemson fan. I don't know. I mean, if Bama was 4-4, I would want to know why. I would want to know. I mean, as a fan, I would want to know what is going on. Like what What are we not doing?
I agree with you there, but I don't think you would be questioning like Nick Saban's contract per se.
Well, no, I mean I wouldn't go with that. I wouldn't.
And that's what this kid was doing though. He was upset that Dabo is making $10.8 million a year, and and Dabo's 15 years at Clemson, he's 165-43, which is a 793 winning percentage, and has made it to a bowl game every single year that he's been there. So
and I agree with that. I'm on Dabo's side too. I can also see it as a fan perspective as to why they can be frustrated because you haven't been in the playoffs since 2020. Something has got to change, whether it is a coaching change or it's I don't want to say a culture change, but you have to start embracing and adapting to the way the sport is changing with the transfer portal, with NIL. So that's just kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, so we'll see, but I think that's all we have on this Clemson rant. Obviously, I think we talked a little bit more about it than I expected to, but it's an interesting situation because I feel like not too often in college football where you see coaches going on, like he literally went on a radio show and he was pissed. If you heard him, he was pissed and he voiced his frustrations. And there's not many big time known coaches like that where you see them do stuff like that. You'll see it, like obviously there was the Ryan Day situation with Lou Holtz and stuff like that, but it's kind of nice to be able to see like the real side of Dabo like that and kind of see like he was frustrated too. But that leads us to some little bit of preview before our Pick'em segment to a crisp fall Saturday night in Tuscaloosa this weekend.
Yes, it is a absolutely huge heavyweight matchup between LSU and Alabama. This is the game. This is one of the games you come to these programs for. LSU 14th in the nation, 6-2, 4-1 in conference. Alabama 7-1, 5-0 in conference. This probably decides the SEC West. Whoever wins this game has the inside track to probably face Georgia in the SEC championship game. This is why you come to these programs. This is why you come to Alabama. This is why you come to LSU to compete in these moments. To compete in this game right here. This game for the better part of a decade has been more important because other than the years where Auburn has gone, it's been either LSU or Alabama, and this is just a huge game on so many levels. You have the statistically number one offense in the nation, and LSU's offense over 500 yards a game, going up against a Bama defense who has improved game by game since the Texas game. They seem to be able to get pressure on these quarterbacks. They seem to be able to stop the run. That their secondary is reliable enough. Now, they have not seen an offense like this since Ole Miss. Now, they didn't get it done against Texas, and so it'll be very interesting to see. But this is also the best defense LSU's offense has gone up against this season.
Oh, easily. And most of LSU's games, they've been completely dominant. They've been able to rely on Jaden Daniels, obviously, probably one of the front runners for the Heisman, arguably, right now.
And this could be his Heisman moment right here.
And it could be. He won last year against Bama in overtime, went for that 2-point conversion. I know it was brutal to see, but was a crazy game, one for the A's. And Jaden Daniels got it done last year, but he was at home, and their defense is much different this year from where it was at last year. And there's some key injuries in this game too, which is another completely different story, which we'll get into. But it's obviously last week they shut out Army 62-0, had a complete game, but it was against Army. It was against Army. And they played Auburn at home before that one, 48-18. But they are dropping points, a crazy amount of points. And we'll get into it in our Pick'em segment too, but to me it's interesting, but I'm just I don't know if LSU's defense, as well as their offense is, I don't think their defense is going to be able to get it done to compete with Alabama.
To me, it all depends on Alabama's defense. Can they? And they're going to be able to stop the run. I think they're going to stop LSU from lining up and just flat out running the ball. I think where it comes down to it is, can Alabama contain Jaden Daniels? Can they prevent him from making plays on the outside, escaping and making plays with his legs? And then can they corral these receivers for LSU, who has probably one of the best receiving corps in the nation?
With Malik Neighbors.
With Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Kyron Lacey. And they have Mason Taylor in the mix at tight end. they have weapons, and they're very versatile. When you throw Jaden Daniels at quarterback on top of all that, and it just makes them that much better.
But I mean, you guys, though, on the other end, though, still with like Kool-Aid McKinstry, Caleb Downs, like you guys also have a secondary that can compete along with as good as LSU's offense is. Like you said at the very beginning of this, is that Alabama does arguably have the best defense that this LSU team is going to play. And I think this game, I don't think it's going to be low scoring, but I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as LSU games usually are. I don't see this game capping 30 points on either side. I think both you guys stay kind of around that range where it's like a 21-24 type game. But I mean, we'll see. It comes down to the wire, and I think the crucial thing about this is I think it comes down to turnovers, and I think that Jaden Daniels might have a pick or two, or maybe a forced fumble.
Well, my thing is it also comes down because I think if it turns into a shootout, if it turns into a high-scoring game, I don't think Alabama's offense is consistent enough, and they haven't been all year. So why would they be this? Why would they do it now? They haven't been consistent enough to prove that they could get into a shootout with this offense because they couldn't do it against Texas. It was starting to turn into a shootout against Texas, and they lost by 10 points. They couldn't keep up offensively, but that was week 2. Alabama's offense has greatly improved, and they're going up against a defense that is going to miss a few DBs and Mekhi Wingo on the defensive line, but they still have Harold Perkins, who is very versatile on that defense. They still have Mason Smith. They still have guys on the defense, and you never know. This could be the game where LSU's defense turns it on. You never know. So
it could be.
If Alabama's offense can play a complete game for all 4 quarters, then Bama can win this game. I think it just comes down to whether or not it becomes a shootout. If it becomes a shootout, LSU wins the game. If Alabama holds their own on defense and it's a low-scoring game like you talked about, then Alabama definitely gains the edge there. I think, and the fact that it is in Tuscaloosa is a huge factor. It'll be loud. It'll be, this is a revenge game. The Bama players have said they have not forgot about the game last year and the way it ended and what happened, and so there's a little bit of a revenge factor to it. So this is a huge game on so many levels. That, like I said in my opening, this is why you come to these programs, is to play in a game like this.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, I think that's all I have to say about it.
And I will be there in Tuscaloosa. I am so ready for this. It's going to be cool. Not going to be hot. The weather is going to be great. I am ready for this game. I'm going to try to make it there for College Game Day too. It is just going to be electric. I can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch that game, especially since it's a night game. So I'll be able to watch the Ohio State game early, watch that game later at night at a dance that I have to be at.
This dude was supposed to go with me.
Yeah, I was supposed to be there, but got to go to a semi-formal for my girlfriend for Phi Mu.
Whipped.
Yeah, hey.
I'm joking.
Gentlemen love Phi Mu. That's all I got to say. But, I mean, on the other side, another game I quickly kind of want to look at just a tad bit that isn't in our Pick'em segment, spoiler alert, but, I mean, not that it's that big of a game, but Penn State at Maryland this week. It's an interesting game to me as a Big Ten fan, just because of the fact that Penn State last week was expected to blow out Indiana when they played Indiana at home, and they didn't. And, I mean, their student section did not show out. Beaver Stadium kind of was a little empty, and you weren't really expecting that. They didn't have a fall break or anything like that. Just there wasn't a ton of people there. And you look at Maryland, they've lost 3 straight following. They lost to Ohio State, and they've lost their other 2 games since then. And Maryland was a team that was arguably, before, when they were playing Ohio State, people argued that they could have been in the top 25. I wouldn't say that now, obviously, but it's an interesting enough point for me to see how both these teams play against each other, because both of them, obviously, Maryland has a really good offense. Penn State has a pretty dominant defense from what we have seen thus far. And I'm just intrigued to kind of see with this Big Ten matchup what happens, because of the fact that and Maryland also averages a ton of yards against them defensively, over 300 yards, and Penn State allows like near 200.
Yeah,
and
I think this is a Drew Aller bounce back game. I think this is where Penn State says, okay, even though there's a loss, even though we have a loss to Ohio State, we're still in it. We still can compete, and stuff like that.
And I mean, you look at it too, game after, obviously, against Indiana. Drew Aller did have a bounce back game. He went 20 for 31, only 210 passing yards, but threw 3 passing touchdowns and had 1 pick. But that's a bounce back game compared to how horribly he played against Ohio State and just had some complete overthrows and misthrows. And
there's another Big Ten game we were talking about earlier that has the lowest over-under in history, Northwestern and Iowa. What a game, man.
I'm pretty sure, what did we say? The over-under set at 29.5. And, I mean, man, usually people are hammering the over. For that game, I'd be hammering the under just because.
First of all, it's Iowa.
It's Iowa and Northwestern.
Score a point to save their life.
And
Northwestern's terrible.
Speaking of that, Iowa just recently made it known to their offensive coordinator that he's done at the end of the season. They said after he'll be able to compete and be with the team still for their bowl game, but right after that game, he's no longer with the program, which is interesting because people are saying next year maybe Iowa will have a competent offense, and I mean, I'll be ready to see those days because I can't remember the last time Iowa had a competent offense.
Oh, the over-under is at 30.5 right now.
Okay, so they moved it up.
Iowa's a 5-point favorite. This is just, I don't know. Like, Northwestern's terrible. They're 4-4.
Too, but
Iowa's a little bit better, but this will be a crapshoot too. Like it's gonna be. I don't know if it's on Peacock. If you want to know about where to watch this game and why. It's on Peacock. So.
I mean, don't say much about that because Ohio State had a game a couple weeks ago at Purdue and it was only on Peacock. And I hate how the Big Ten's having games like that now because I had to pay $5 just to watch an Ohio State game because I wasn't going to not watch it. But, I mean, I would be hammering the under on that
game. And there's a couple more games flying under the radar, in my opinion, that's not in our Pick'em segment. Texas A&M at Ole Miss. Watch out for that one. Ohio State at Rutgers. Yeah, man, you never know how Ohio State's going to show up. There's a couple
obviously,
others.
Oregon State and Colorado. That'll be a good game. See if Colorado can bounce back after getting their jewelry taken at UCLA.
Sorry, Brandon.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I don't know.
You got Cal at Oregon. You got Virginia Tech at Louisville. Man, you coming down to the stretch now where every game counts, and every game from now on, like not only does winning matter, but the way you win matters as well. Because, I mean, if you're Ohio State and you're playing against Rutgers, you are expected to not only beat Rutgers, but also handle your business and maybe not blow them out, but take care of your business.
And especially being the number 1 team in the country now, they should do that. And we'll see what will happen. Obviously, I mean, number 1, like I just stated. But, I mean, last week at Wisconsin, they won 24-10. And for me, that's still a nail-biter, especially since now they're the number 1 team. They shouldn't be beating Wisconsin 24-10. It should be a way more of a blowout, at least in my opinion. That's just how I am. But, it'll be interesting. It's at Rutgers, too. The last time Ohio State was at Rutgers, big game. I think there was, 1 pick six. There was, 2 or 3 other picks. And, I mean, that means that Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr. are kind of going back into their hometown territory in that area. Obviously, from kind of that Maryland, Pennsylvania area, but more Pennsylvania. But I mean, still got roots on that East Coast, so it'll be interesting to see because Rutgers heavily recruited both of them as well. And Kyle McCord has yet to have a really big standout game. I'd say I've been seeing so many memes, especially from the Ohio State community, about how Kyle McCord is like the definition of like a 72 overall Madden quarterback. Like it's like he has you can have with a 72 overall Madden quarterback, you could have like some good moments, some good throws, but you can also have some like what the moments where you're sitting there like what just happened. Yeah. And I mean, and that's how it's been. So I mean, Ohio State's number 1 right now, and I think Kyle McCord will make that leap within these next few games, but we'll see.
Yeah, let's get in our pick'em segment. We got a huge game at South Alabama this weekend. It's Thursday night. It's going to be on ESPN2. It's South Alabama and Troy for the battle for the belt. That'll be in our pick'em as well. Let's bring in on Savannah Rose and let's pick some games,
and
man.
Just a reminder though. Welcome to our Week 10 college football pick'em segment. This week, after a week last week without a guest picker, we've had officially 2 weeks, I think, without a guest picker. We're finally back with a guest picker, and this week it is Savannah Rose Fonville with us, ready to pick these super exciting games today. I mean, we have quite a few. We kind of switched it up a little bit too, because there was a couple games that could have been in this mix. We wanted to switch it up a little bit, show a little bit of appreciation towards some Group of 5 schools this week.
We got a couple of big games within the state here as well. We'll pick them in a few minutes, but South Alabama and Troy, LSU heading to Tuscaloosa, battle for the SEC West. That's going to be a dogfight. I will be in Tuscaloosa for that game. I am super excited. Actually, I'll be in Troy too, with the South game as well. But I'll be at both games. It's going to be exciting. Those games are going to be exciting.
No, and some big games in the SEC this week too, along with Big 12. There's a lot of really good games this week. But we're going to start it off a little bit untraditionally with the James Madison Dukes headed to Georgia State. Obviously, James Madison is undefeated, 8-0 overall, 5-0 in conference. Georgia State is 6-2, 3-2 in conference. And Georgia State's coming off of a loss at Georgia Southern last week. And obviously, James Madison's been dominant all year long. They have Jordan McLeod, their quarterback. He's had a great year. But then on Georgia State's side, they have Marcus Carroll, their running back, who's rushed for over 1,000 yards. Lots of production for the Georgia State offense. But James Madison is extremely dominant. I think they're too dominant. Even though they're going to Georgia State, I don't think Georgia State stands a chance. It sucks that James Madison won't be bowl eligible because they're the bowl ban, and won't be able to play in the Sun Belt Conference Championship, because this team would definitely be ranked in the top 25 right now in the college football playoff rankings, and I got James Madison big.
I think this is a trap game for James Madison. I think there's a time and a place where they slip up. Georgia State coming off a brutal loss to Georgia Southern. I like the quarterback. I like what they've been doing all year. Actually play LSU in a couple weeks, which I'm sure they probably won't give LSU a challenge. But as good as Georgia State has been this year, I'm picking the Panthers at home for an upset. James Madison Dukes will be undefeated no more after this weekend.
Whatever you say.
I don't agree. I actually am going to go off of that. I think JMU is going to play incredibly. Here's my thing. Georgia State is going to put up more of a fight than people are assuming, because they just got their butts handed to them by Southern. So I think that they're going to be like, it's home, it's exciting. The morale is going to be really high in the stadium. But I think when it comes to skill set, JMU's got this. So my pick is JMU.
All right.
So
now going back into another ranked matchup, obviously some contention between this team that I'm going to mention. Number 5 Washington is headed to number 20 USC in SoCal. And the crazy thing about this matchup is obviously college football playoff rankings just came out. Washington's number 5. A lot of people were a little upset with that Washington wasn't in the top 4. Obviously, there's lots of factors that go into that. But you got to think about the fact, obviously Washington's undefeated. They beat Oregon, but their last 4 games have been extremely close. Last week, in their last 4 games, they beat Arizona by 7. They beat Oregon by 3. They beat ASU by 8, and they beat Stanford by 9. So obviously they've had some really close games the last 4 times. And they started off the season extremely dominant. Obviously they have Michael Penix leading the way. They have Roma Dunze, however you say his name, great wide receiver, one of the top wide receivers in college football. But then there's obviously USC with a completely dominant offense, but they won by 1 last week at Cal, and Caleb Williams is kind of struggling. Obviously, they lost back-to-back weeks to Notre Dame and Utah. They're home, but I think Washington still wins this game big. I don't think USC has a competent enough defense to be able to hold Washington and Michael Penix back. I think Washington wins this game by 3 scores or more.
I don't know about 3 scores or more, because USC does have the offense to keep up. They still have Caleb Williams. They still have Taj Washington, Zachariah Branch. That offense is still electric. I mean, no matter how you put it, the defense is the problem. I do pick Washington to win this game, but I think it's close. I think it's a shootout. But this is coming down to the stretch where the Pac-12 can, especially these undefeated. Well, I wouldn't say undefeated teams. The only undefeated one is Washington. But these teams cannot start cannibalizing themselves late in the season, or they will find themselves yet again not in the playoff picture. Washington and Oregon right now are their only hopes, and so I think Washington keeps that alive. I don't know. I like Washington here, but I just think it's close.
I think it's going to be a fun game. I obviously am going to pick Washington just for, like I said, skill set and their ranking, and then they've just been killing it lately. But USC, I don't know, guys. I'm
It's a-
pulling for USC,
It's
but
a
I
must-win
think
game for USC if they want any hope of at least playing in the Pac-12 championship game.
it'll be good. I want USC to win, but I think Washington's going to pull this one.
Yeah,
back.
I think Lincoln Riley is kind of getting put kind of off the irrelevant scale, and I wouldn't say he's on the hot seat, but just he has never had a defense, and that's where it struggles
Don't
for
be
him.
surprised if the NFL comes calling.
Oh, they definitely
I'm
will.
just throwing that out
They
there.
definitely will, but leading into our next game, going back to where Lincoln Riley came from before USC, number 9 Oklahoma heads to Boone Pickens Stadium facing off against the number 22
I've been there.
Oklahoma State Cowboys. Crazy thing about Oklahoma State is obviously right now they're 6-2, 4-1 in conference. They started off the season losing to our South Alabama Jaguars.
Not just losing, they got blown out.
Yeah, they got blown out. And then also they lost to Iowa State University. But the big thing for me is obviously Oklahoma is coming off a huge loss at Kansas last week. Kansas rallied that whole entire game. They had like an hour rain delay. Obviously, come back into that. Kansas' stadium is like near empty, and they still rally back and beat Oklahoma at home with a lot of people leaving the game after that rain delay. And you're looking at this Oklahoma State team who is a completely different team from when they played South Alabama. You look at Ollie Gordon, their starting running back. He has rushed for 978 yards in the past 5 games. He has been a complete terror to defenses. And that's the thing that's kind of doing it for me, because Dylan Gabriel in these last few close games that he's had for Oklahoma, he hasn't played to expectations, and he has not been playing well under pressure at all. Now obviously, Oklahoma averages just close to 500 yards per game, and Oklahoma State gives up over 400 yards per game. But I know Oklahoma's the better team here. They're coming off of a week where they need to win, especially at Boone Pickens Stadium. But I think Oklahoma State has all the momentum right now. They're at home, and I think Ollie Gordon runs over this Oklahoma defense. And Oklahoma State
Does that
wins.
mean by transfer of property, that South Alabama beat is better than OU? No, I'm joking.
Hey, it might be.
No, okay, so Oklahoma State, obviously, you just discussed it. We just discussed it. They somehow got blown out by our South Alabama Jaguars, especially the way our Jaguars have been playing as of late. It just doesn't add up. They seem to have settled on quarterback. When they played South Alabama, they played 3 different quarterbacks in that game, and they didn't seem to know. It seemed like all hope was lost. Oklahoma State was calling for Gundy to be fired, clean house, all this other stuff. But now it seems that they've settled on a quarterback. They found a weapon in Ollie Gordon. I just think the Sooners, though, a must-win game, rivalry game. Now, I will say it is a rivalry game. This will probably be the last time we see Oklahoma State in a while, with Oklahoma going to the SEC next year. So what an opportunity for the Cowboys to maybe knock off Oklahoma for the last time. But I just think the Sooners are too much, which would be too much to handle. Brett Venables, I think, will have these guys to play, and they'll go in there and get a win in the last Bedlam series for who knows, you know.
No, Sooners all the way. There's no question about it. I don't think OSU stands a chance, actually, but it is a big rivalry. It is a big game. Like you said, we don't see this very often. I do think that Oklahoma Sooners will pull it through, though.
We'll see. I mean, Oklahoma does dominate the series like 89-19.
Yeah.
And I mean, but last week you look, Oklahoma was at Kansas, and Oklahoma dominated that series like 90-something to like 14, and Kansas pulled off that upset at home. I still think Oklahoma State's got it. But leads us right into our next game. Not the game of the week, but it's a huge SEC matchup. Lots of questions are being raised about this matchup. We got number 12 Mizzou headed to Athens, Georgia, taking on number 2 Georgia. Obviously, after the college football playoff rankings came out, Georgia's got some momentum now and something to feed off of, because Ohio State jumped them in the rankings. And you know that Kirby is going to use that to his advantage.
Is looking at this and
he's
licking his chops.
That's the thing that scares me the most about this. Obviously, last year's game in Columbia, Missouri was extremely close. Everyone thought Mizzou was going to pull off that upset. I mean, this is a very interesting game to me, because obviously Mizzou's coming off a bye. Luther Burden is an elite receiver. Obviously, Brady Cook is all right. He's not quite there. Mizzou does have a top 20 offense, but you got to think they're going up against Georgia's defense. You're going up against Carson Beck, Dejon Edwards, all these other guys that are even more elite. And I think Georgia just has all the momentum going to this game, being ranked number 2. Kirby is going to make them feed off of the Missouri Tigers, and Georgia wins big.
And we thought last week against Florida and Jacksonville it could have been a closer game because of the absence of Brock Bowers, but they found a way to use other guys, and they had a freshman tight end out there that looked exactly like Brock Bowers. It looked like he just changed his jersey number to 4. They have weapons everywhere. They've shown that they can be without Brock Bowers the rest of the year and probably still win it all. But I do give Missouri a little bit more credit. Their defense is pretty good. How they're ranked over LSU when LSU beat them, I don't know. That's a topic for another day. But I still like the Bulldogs here at home. I still think they slip up this season, but I don't think it's right now. The game I'm looking at is that game in Knoxville in a couple weeks. But it depends on how they play these next couple weeks. But I like the Bulldogs at home. I mean, there's not much I can say about that. I mean, Georgia's probably going to win by 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Okay, here's what I say. I think Missouri's had a great season. They've had a great season. I think that they've played some pretty good ball. They are going against Georgia, though. That is where it comes into play. Like, it's Georgia. You can't really go up against them right now, especially being Mizzou. But I think with their program history of 0-17 for playing number 1 teams, it's not. I don't think there's going to be a competition. I think it's going to be a 3 to 4 touchdown range. I'm going big. I'm going big.
It probably will. There's definitely a reason to go big on that. Georgia's just a great team. And now, like, looking at it, like, with the college football playoff rankings, I know I keep alluding back to that.
No,
but it's just like
number 1 right now. Right?
I know we're number, and because the college football playoff committee is looking at resume right now, and they're really pissing off Georgia based off of that, saying that Georgia doesn't have as much of a competent resume to compete with Ohio State right now. And Kirby's going to use that for sure. But leading into our next game, I think this is a slept-on matchup, probably the slept-on matchup of the week. You got number 23 Kansas State going to number 7 Texas. This is a game where Malik Murphy is probably going to be starting again for Texas. It'll either be Malik Murphy or Arch Manning. Obviously, Malik Murphy had an okay game last week in his first start of the year. Definitely not what Texas fans were probably looking for. And I think the big thing for me this game is Kansas State has not allowed a touchdown in 9 quarters. The past 9 quarters that their defense has been on the field, they have not allowed a touchdown. And Texas's offense has turned the ball over 7 times within the last 3 games. And they only turned the ball over 2 times within the first 5 games. So you're looking at that turnover ratio there, and it's not looking too hot for Texas, especially with if it's Malik Murphy at starting quarterback, which it probably will be. He threw a pick last week. Not too big of a deal. They still won. But I think Kansas State goes to Austin, Texas, and pulls off the upset. Right now, their defense has been playing at an elite level. I think without Quinn Ewers, even if Arch Manning's starting, whoever it is starting at quarterback, I don't think that it matters. I think Kansas State is going into Texas looking for blood, and they tear the Longhorns apart.
Whew.
I don't know. So you're predicting that Oklahoma and Texas loses.
Yes.
And by the way, that eliminates any chance of the Big 12 to get in the playoffs.
Exactly. Right now, there's a 5-way tie at the top of the Big 12 conference. And I think Kansas State pulls it off.
I don't know.
That was a little bold. They are scrappy though. They're a very scrappy team.
I gotta go with the Longhorns here just because I think there's too much talent. Yes, Malik Murphy. It was his first start last weekend. I mean, you could always expect first start jitters. I just think Texas is too talented. I think their running back Brooks is a dog. They have some guys on the outside and they have too many weapons. They're still pretty good on defense. I like the Longhorns here at home, and I don't want the Longhorns. I need the Longhorns to kind of keep winning, so it makes Bama's loss a little bit better to them. So. But
you're just trying to redeem yourself. Nothing redeems that game.
Yeah, I want Texas to somehow play Alabama again. But I mean, I truly think the Longhorns won't have a problem against Kansas State.
Like I said, Kansas State's scrappy, and I feel like they're gonna, like Josh said, I agree that they're gonna cause an upset, but I disagree that they're going to win. I think the score will hang in there first half. Second half, Texas is gonna finish it, shut it out, dominate it. That's my pick, Texas. You should have some backlash for that option.
Hey, whatever y'all say, whatever y'all want to say. But leading into our next game, we got our South Alabama Jaguars for the Battle of the Belt, headed to Troy, Alabama. Obviously, there's some questions going into this game if Carter Bradley's going to start or not. We're not aware at this current moment, but this is a huge game. Obviously, Troy won last year in Hancock Whitney Stadium. Big game. I think this is more of a battle of the running backs between LaDamian Webb and Kamani Vidal, or however you say his last name. Obviously, he had a great year last year, rushed for over 1,000 yards. Likewise to LaDamian Webb. Both of them had crazy good years. Both of these teams are very comparable on their offenses. They both average South averages over 450 yards a game. Troy averages 441 yards a game. Both of them allow a little over 300 yards on defense per game. And I mean, both of these teams are very good, very polished. Obviously, both of them are competing to try and get to that Sun Belt West Conference title. And I don't know, it's very hard for me to pick against South this game, and I'm not going to. I'm going to pick South to pull this game off in Troy, Alabama. But it's going to be a close one. I think it's going to be just like last year. It's going to be extremely low scoring. I think the defenses are going to get after it, and I think South Alabama wins by 3 or less.
So, I think this this game came down to the wire last year, and it did ultimately decide the winner of our division in the Sun Belt, and Troy went on to win the Sun Belt. They're the reigning Sun Belt champions. I think Troy's team is a little bit better than last year. Gunnar Watson has been on a tear as their quarterback. I don't know, man. It all comes down to if Carter's playing, I think. But I can't pick against Troy. I hate Troy too. I'm picking the Jags going there and winning, baby.
Y'all are about to make me look awful. I'm gonna look
Jay's
like,
up, baby!
I'm gonna look like such a bad Jag. Okay, so here's my thing. If you would have asked me before the last game that South just played, I probably would have had a little bit more like for South Alabama. But after watching the Cajuns game, it was just it was hard. It was hard watching them give up towards the end. I was like, I don't even know if I can stay because they gave up right there. I love my Jaguars, but we have to play the whole game. And I think, here's the thing, if we have Carter Bradley going into this Troy game, there will be a little bit of a fight. But if we don't have him, which I guess we find out tomorrow, I'm a little nervous. Troy has a very good team this year. They're doing very well, and this is a big rivalry. Obviously, we talk a lot of smack for a team that got beat by them. I love South, y'all. Don't get me wrong. I love the Jaguars, but I am going to have to go with Troy just because I'm so unsure about the injury status, and also Troy is a really good team this year. And I love South, y'all. I love South, but Troy's a really good team.
You got to go with who you got to go with. That's fine.
I have to pick Troy, but please.
Everybody come for her head.
Please don't. I love my Jaguars.
All right, but to close it out now for the Week 10 College Football Pick'em segment, obviously, game of the week. Bryant's getting excited over there. You see him licking his lips with the big old smile on his face.
He's been waiting this whole time.
But you got number 14 LSU headed to T-Town, playing number 8 Alabama. Obviously, some big implications going into this game.
Huge.
Yeah, for the SEC, potentially to make the SEC Conference Championship game. Obviously, LSU 6-2. 4-1 in conference. They lost to Florida State week 1, lost to Ole Miss in a shootout a few weeks back. Yeah. Obviously, Bama's only loss coming to Texas. And this is a huge game. Obviously, LSU has a completely dominant offense, averaging over 552 yards per game.
The top offense in the country.
Seriously, number 1 total offense in the country. But their defense gives up close to 400 yards per game.
I was just about to say, we can't ignore their defense either.
Exactly. And that's the one issue here. Obviously, they have Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels helped them beat Alabama last year at LSU. That was a crazy game. But I think the big thing for Bama as of right now is the fact that LSU their defense is already shaky, and in this game 3 of their DBs are out, and arguably their best defensive lineman, Mekhi Wingo. You know what? I'll say whatever I want to say. I'll say whatever I want to say.
We're Big Ten people. Leave us alone.
But I think that's the key thing for me going into this game is that their defense is already bad. And the fact that they have potentially 4 starters out. And I mean, Nick Saban has never lost to a quarterback in consecutive years since he was at Michigan State and Drew Brees being back-to-back years.
I was actually going to mention that too.
And I don't think Jaden Daniels is good, but I don't think he's good enough to beat Saban back-to-back years.
I want to hear yours first.
Okay. I feel a little bad, but LSU. Okay, here's why. Like he was just saying, best offense in the nation. They have an incredible defense too. And here's my thing about Alabama. They can't hide Milroe. They can't. They just can't. And I just don't think that, I don't know. I think everybody who goes for Bama is like, oh, obviously this is going to be, you're probably going to say it in 10 seconds. But I think LSU is coming to play, and they know that Alabama's a little shaky right now, and I think 100% they're going to take advantage of that. And it's going to go in their favor. LSU. Sorry.
Alabama has been shaky this season, but so has LSU. I mean, they've lost to Ole Miss in a shootout. Arguably should have lost to Missouri, but they pulled that one out. Of course, they got dominated by Florida State again. So here's my thing: it's going to come down to Alabama's defense. Could they get the stops enough to give Alabama's offense a chance? Because if it does turn into a shootout, I don't know if Alabama's offense can be consistent enough all 4 quarters to keep up with LSU's offense. But I trust Bama's defense. This is the same scenario of last year. Bama loses a game to Tennessee early in the season and loses to Texas early in the season. LSU loses to Florida State and they lose to somebody else. I forgot who they lost to last year. It might have been Auburn. I don't know. They lost somebody last year early.
I think they lost them.
Anyway, they had 2 losses going into this game. Alabama had 1 loss. Whoever wins this game more than likely will go to the SEC championship game. If Alabama wins, all they'll have to do is beat Kentucky next week, and they're in. The Iron Bowl won't matter, but if LSU wins, it gets dicey because you still have Ole Miss 1 loss who did beat LSU. I don't know. I trust Alabama's team as a whole more than LSU's defense. I think Milroe has been coming along, and I normally, this is normally one of those games where I pick, LSU in reverse psychology, but no, I'm trusting the Tide all the way. Roll, Tide, roll. We're going to the SEC championship game this year to face Georgia.
All right, don't jump the
You're
gun.
doing what?
Don't jump the gun too far. But I do think Alabama wins this game, and I think Jace McClellan has the game of the year. I think last week was his best week rushing wise against Tennessee.
Here's
if I'm not mistaken.
Here's the thing. Bama's going to try and milk the clock. I think with the weaknesses that they have that LSU has on the defensive line, they're going to be able to control the time of possession
easily.
And keep Jaden Daniels in that offense off the field. I trust Bama's defensive line. I trust their secondary. I trust Bama's team as a whole, and that's where I'm leaning. Bama's been in this spot before. Winner go home or winner don't make the play. I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Bama's been in this spot once before.
And
that was last year.
I don't trust them. Call me crazy, but I don't trust. I'm obviously not an Alabama fan, but I can recognize talent when there is talent, and I just don't. I don't trust that they're going to be able to just level-headedly win this and milk the clock. They're going to need the clock.
I mean, LSU could very well win this game. I mean, they have the best shot right now of anybody to knock off Alabama besides Auburn, which.
Okay.
It's in that game's in Jordan Harris. That's why I say that.
Yeah, crazy things happen during here.
But I'm just saying, I don't know. With this game being in Tuscaloosa, Bryant Denny's going to be absolutely bonkers. I think all that plays in here, and there hasn't been a coach. The only coach that's beaten Saban back-to-back seasons at Alabama has been Hugh Freeze, and even he barely did that. So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. Definitely going to come down to the wire, but I mean, just absolutely bonkers games.
Roll Tide.
Who did you pick? Alabama?
Yeah, I'm picking Alabama too. I think their running game too between Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams. I think they are going to feast on this LSU defense. Like you said, managing the clock.
Jalen Milroe can run as well.
Exactly, and it's like I don't think LSU
last year
was
They're going to rely on him way too much.
They haven't relied on his running at all the last few games.
I'm telling you, they're going to have to for this game.
We'll see. I don't think LSU's defense is going to be able to get it done. And I mean,
I do.
It's in Brandon.
And I don't like the
I'll say
LSU
this:
Tigers.
if it turns into a shootout, LSU will win. If it's a low-scoring game, like a 28-24, there's been only 2 times in the last decade where LSU has scored over 17 points against Alabama. They've won both times. If they can if they can score more than 30 points against Alabama, then LSU will win the game. If they score under 30 points,
well, we'll see though, because I mean, you look at another game this year alone that was a shootout. LSU at Ole Miss, and look what happened there.
Yeah.
That game, Ole Miss won that game by 6 points.
Ole Miss's offense is a little bit more consistent than Alabama's.
A little bit, but I mean, I don't know. I think you guys definitely have the edge. So
I think we do too. I think this is Alabama's game to lose. I think Alabama's got all the. everything going for them right now. LSU has more going against than for them. So
Which is why I think they're going to fight a little bit harder. So
we'll see.
We'll see. You'll be there. You'll be there. So
I will
we'll
be
see.
there.
That is going to close it out, though, for our Week 10 college football pick'em segment. We cannot thank Savannah Rose enough for joining us on this episode. Already well over 30 episodes at this point, episode 31.
Woo!
And, I mean, moving forward, it's already November,
Yeah.
meaning at the end of this month, we got some rivalry weeks coming up.
That's right.
And Thanksgiving's coming up, too. So, I mean, it's
These two will have a little bit of beef.
Go
going.
blue. Go blue.
Oh, OH, baby.
I'm gonna have a
Go
good
Blue all
day.
day.
It's a good thing I'm not going to be here that week.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. But
Go cheaters, you mean?
Shut up.
Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, give us any feedback that you guys want, and we look forward to just moving forward. Episode 32 coming out next week. Thank you guys for tuning in.